Book of Ebon Tides has a ton of player options, 52 spells, 16 new species and subspecies, 10 subclasses, 22 monsters and NPCs, and 80 magical items and more. That is a ton of content.
It is a boatload, a vast entire shadow plane of content.
How big is this book?
Over 200 pages.
Yeah, you can hold it
Easy.
up, yeah.
I'm going to hold it up and just say, yes, it is a large book. It's 254 pages.
What are some of the player options in this?
So player options, bear folk. Everybody loves bear folk. You may remember I came on, I talked about how everybody loved bear folk in Tomo Beast 1 as a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, here they are as a playable race. And the Darakul, who are undead, and then the two big ones are the Shadow Fae and the Shadow Goblins. And those two, I mean, the bear folk you sort of get from the name.
Yeah.
The Darakul, I say, well, they're ghouls, and you can play an anti-hero ghoul, yeah. The Shadow Fae are elves gone wrong. They're the old school Fae, the ones who really aren't that nice. And they have mastery over shadow and high magic, and they live on the plane of shadow and do what they please. And their servants are the Shadow Goblins, who are sort of the comic relief group here, right? If you like playing halflings or kobolds, or gnomes, then maybe a Shadow Goblin is for you.
I mean, I love anything goblin. So
yes.
If I get more goblin options, I'm kind of in.
These are delightful. They're connected to the Shadow Fae, but obviously they can go off and do their own thing. They've got their share of shadow magic. And the nice thing about the Shadow Goblins, at least as presented in the setting part of the book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, they're a little bit criminal.
Oh, perfect.
Right? Like they don't call them mob bosses, but the Shadow Goblins answer to bigger Shadow Goblins who answer to more important Shadow Goblins who...
Oh, great.
Everybody got to, pass the bribes up the chain.
Perfect.
So that's the culture is, you want a favor? Sure. It'll cost. So the lunar elves are luminous. They're sort of children of the moon. They are sensitive to sunlight, so they live in the dark. They speak both Elvish and Umbral, the language of shadow. They're lovely. They can emit light, right? That's lunar elves. Sable elves are a little less nice. They have a blood affinity for certain magic. So there's a school of magic they're especially good at. And they're all exiles, so they've all got an attitude. Like the shadow elves. I wanted to talk about the humans, though, because changelings are in here.
Oh, yeah.
A very traditional folkloric thing, stolen away by the Fae, raised among them in their shadowy courts. What does that mean? Well, changeling humans have, they speak Elvish, they speak Umbral, they're generally charismatic, and they're great at deception and persuasion because that's sort of what they're about, right? They've had to grow up among the Fae and defend themselves against those talky, slithery, difficult Fae. So I like those. There's a couple others, like Ratatosk, which are squirrel folk, are in here. There's hedgehog folk called the Arena. The Ratatosk are hilarious. They're small celestials. They climb up and down the world tree. Right?
Yes. So, very famous Norwegian myth.
Right?
Yeah.
Straight out of that. And the other one that's in here, which I like, is the Stygian Shade. So the river Styx is sort of the inspiration for this, right? Crossing into the afterlife. It's, you're basically a ghost, right? You are a spirit of someone who has departed the mortal world, and you're still around and adventuring. So you're ghostly. You can rip away your face and terrify people with your true...
The full Beetlejuice, yeah.
You can go full Beetlejuice, yeah, but you're not perfectly undead. You're still sort of humanoid. You're still linked to the mortal world. I think it's fantastic, right? Like, you've got this mysterious origin. Clearly, you're hanging around for some reason. I think there's a lot of storytelling potential in playing one of the shades. There's Raven folk in here, too, which Kobold Press fans will know from the Midgard setting. And then there's one group that's... I had some discussions here about whether these really belong. The Satar, who are purely evil and looking to bring about the death of the universe.
Perfect. So a player.
So a player, right? I was like, well, ghouls are undead and they eat flesh, so I have, I have some concerns about that as a playable race.
But that's some players want that.
Anti-hero. These guys, let's end it all. Let's bring about the Ragnarok, the apocalypse. But the important thing to know about the Satar is that they're not in a hurry about it.
Okay.
Right? Like, we'll get to that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
And then the last one, because you did say 16, I think I hit most of them. The weird gnome, weird with a Y.
Yeah.
They're sort of psychic gnomes who know too much.
Oh.
And the more of them you jam into a small room, the more psychic and precognitive they get.
Oh, great.
So they're very odd gnomes, but they're natural diviners, and they have prescience. They have foresight.
Perfect.
Which, in rules terms, hey, I want to know what's coming.
So, on top of this, we have a lot of subclasses.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Circle of Shadows Druid, College of Shadows Bard.
Sensing a theme.
Yeah. Well, but they're not all that. There's a keeper domain for the cleric, which is sort of a warding and protective, a very dutiful sort of cleric. And there's the light weaver sorcerer, which is just the opposite of all that darkness, right? This is the sorcerer who commands sunshine, chases the shadows away, and here comes the sun, basically, is that sorcerer. So that radiant sorcerer has some things like shields that reflect things back. Oh man, we got a warlock, we got an arcane tradition shadow wizard.
What's the warlock?
Oh, the warlock, called Mother of Sorrows, and they bind themselves to her. It's kind of dark.
Warlocks?
Yeah, the Mother of Sorrows is she who knows what happened to all lost children who die of disease.
Oh my God.
Lost in the woods.
That is dark.
So, yeah, she knows where all the orphans...
Old-timey fairy tale stuff.
Yeah, it's very fairy tale, like the children kidnapped and never returned from the woods. The young apprentice who thought he was going to a better place, but no.
What are the two for shadow? You said shadow circle
for the druid? Yes. So the druid circle, it's circle of shadows, right? Pretty straightforward. They have an umbral form. So more than a wild shape, they've got a shadow shape, right? They get all sorts of hide stuff, and they can awaken shadows to do their bidding.
Lovely. And then we have another shadow class.
Well, the College of Shadows Bard can conjure up shadows to dance, can instill fear of the dark into others, can shadow step places, can do everything that's terror of the night, basically, is the College of Shadows Bard, right?
Perfect.
So, I don't know. I picture them as fairly metal, but that's just me.
Fair, yeah.
And the arcane tradition, the Shadow Wizard, there's a whole section in here where I wrote, and Celeste wrote, new shadow magic, and lots of it. And so that all plays with this arcane tradition.
How would you sum up the Book of Ebon Tides?
So this is the dark side of the Fae that I always thought needed some punching up in D&D, right? Like the, hey, that's scary, don't steal the children kind of Fae. Along with a ton of shadow magic, a ton of illusion. It's basically the theme around it is, welcome to the plane of shadow and all its people. And at least in the D&D tradition, the plane of shadow goes back to Gary Gygax and the very first editions of the game, and it was tightly bound in with illusions and illusion magic, right? Shadow is linked to magic, it's linked to illusion and the Fae. It's also got overtones of the undead, like the Shade character we were talking about, and the ghouls. The bear folk are in there kind of carving out a safer place than most. They're tough enough to handle it. But yeah, it's everything to do with shadow, everything to do with the Fae, magic. I mean, it's half a book for the players and half a book for the game master to say, they'll never see it coming. There's some beautiful stuff like adventure seeds, different roles for servants, quick naming tables. You know, I need a butler. I need a Fae underling. I need the name of the knight on the road.
And then we've got the monsters.
And then the monsters. You see, I got so distracted. I didn't even get to the monsters, but you're right. Some of these are very practical, right? Like a Shadow Fae bandit and a Shadow Goblin chieftain.
Yeah.
You're going to get use out of those if you're doing a shadow adventure at all. A Sable Elf and a Sable Elf Hierophant, right? Okay, dark exiled elves, river spirits, rose golems. Okay, the rose golem, this is the gnome's fault.
Okay.
That's a phrase I use a lot in my game.
The gnomes get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well, rose golems. So you grow a bunch of rose bushes, you give them magical fragrances, and you set them loose wandering the gardens of the Fae, right?
Oh, are they full of thorns?
They are full of thorns. They have reasonable armor and a little bit of stealth because they look like a flowering thing, right? They will slam you hard, but the main thing is they will put you to sleep, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the rose golems creep up on you, or if you wander the gardens, and there you are. You're out for an hour.
Wow.
And being out for an hour, at least in most of the Shadow Fae or gnomish sorts of courts and palaces, at the least, they've written something in Elvish on your forehead.
Right.
More likely, they've taken something you meant to keep.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else? Moon Shadow Catchers, work with those. We've got some NPCs I'm not going to spoil. The Mole Folk are in here. The Knight of Shadows is sort of a classic Dark Knight. Lunar Devils, Keepers of Hounds, Keepers of Ravens, Gnomish Distillers, and then a couple of Bear Folk, right? Like a Bear Folk Druid and a Birch Siren. I don't know why I think birch trees are scarier than regular trees.
Okay, yeah.
But they are. They're white.
Yeah.
In a plane of shadow. And so birch sirens are kind of what they sound. They're sort of variant dryads with a psychic shriek that will,
And then we have a ton of magical items.
Yes. All that stuff's in there. And the magic items, I had a blast writing magic items. So some of them are, how do I put this? They're not necessarily always useful, but they're highly entertaining. The illusion seeds I'm really proud of because it's kind of like feather tokens.
Yeah.
But they don't last, right? So an illusion seed could be, I want to conjure up a dragon. And you plant that illusion seed, it springs up. You don't have any choice over what kind of dragon it is, but it shows up and it's your friend.
Perfect.
For a while, as long as you can keep talking it into staying. And then it disappears, right? So others are like places. I need a tavern. I'm out on the lonely moors. I have an illusion seed of a warm, welcoming tavern. Well, it's kind of like Tiny Hut, only there are actual people in there. Like the fairness of it is usually making things more complicated.
Yeah.
A teleport spell in here called Lunar Transference, which is strictly worse than teleport in every way.
Okay.
But it's more entertaining because you can only cast it at night, can only cast it on a sleeping creature. And if the sleeping creature makes its saving throw, instead of you teleporting it out of the castle to someplace you wanted it to go, you, the caster, are teleported to the place you wanted that victim to go. So in terms of story and abducting princes and princesses out of the tower, it's great. Overnight, while they were sleeping, the royal child was stolen. But if you're optimizing not for story, but for effect, like we need to get out of here before these Shadow Fae kill us all, go with teleport.
Yeah. Perfect.
Like there's shadow armor, there's those illusion seeds I was talking about. There's magical wines, wine of the summer court. There's a ring of dancing. There's a artifact level item called the Book of Ebon Tides.
Of course.
Which, all right, giant digression here. So the Ebon Tides are what moves stuff around on the plane of shadows because, at least in this conception of the plane, it would be boring if the landscape was always the same. Shadows move. As I see the plane of shadows, mountains move, rivers wander, forests creep around. And the Book of Ebon Tides lets you shape the landscape. And there are other tricks around that. But there's something called the collapsible mountain. Fairly useful.
Yeah. I can see that.
Ring of dancing, you think you don't need it until you go to a Fae court and somebody invites you.
You can't dance.
You can't dance.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're going to embarrass yourself in front of everyone and you'll never get your mission done if you can't dance.
That's fair.
And something called the Witchlight Witchlight Scimitar, which is also very nice. Yeah, some wands, some potions, these weird seeds that are pure illusion. A truckload of spells.
That is a lot of content for masters and players to mess around with.
Right? It's sort of a big toy box for anybody who is going to tell a fairy tale type story or a Shadowfell story, or even a story that kind of goes a little dark about the, Lost in the Woods side of things.
And if you're watching this, that's available now on D&D Beyond.
It is.
And it's in the character builder. You can do anything you want with it.
Do as you please with it. Build those characters, use those monsters, hand out those treasures.